Welcome to yet another video from Climatrix Data Labs. Today we're going to talk about loops in Python. Again, these are one of the most important features not only of Python but of any programming languages. And there are primarily two major loop statements in Python, the for loop and the while loop. Now, before we get into these loops, let's first try to understand what are loops. So loops can be understood from the point of view of thinking about a repetitive task. So if you are repeating a task, you most likely would like to use a loop in a programming language. So in layman's term, let's try to understand it from this simple example. So if let's say you want to add number one 10 times like this. So if you initiate a variable x and then add 1 to it again twice, thrice, four times, and five times, and then you can get the value of x with 1 added five times, right? But instead of doing it like this in one, two, three, four, five steps, you can do it if there's a possibility to do it this way. So it would be better if you could do it like this. For instance, you can say x is 0 and then say do the next step five times and then say add 1 to x. So initially x is 0 here. So then to 0 I add 1. So x becomes 1. Then again it goes again, does second times. So x is 1, again add 1 to it, becomes 2 this time. Again go to the loop 3, 4 and 5. And since it has added 5 times, it comes out of the loop. This in simple terms is loop, and this is how loop helps you to do a repetitive task in very simple terms. Now, loops, like in any other programming language, in Python, more or less follow the same pattern or logic. It executes a set of statements in a program repetitively based on a condition, very important condition. Loop is repeatedly executed as long as this condition remains true. The moment it becomes false, it comes out of the loop. Condition is checked based on the value of loop's control variable. So there is a variable in the loop which is used to check the condition. We'll come to it in next few slides. When the condition becomes false, the loop terminates, like I said. So we also need to ensure that looping condition must become false sometime or while you're executing the loop. So in due course of time, it should become false. Otherwise, you will be going into an infinite loop, which means you will be perpetually into that loop and your system will hang or the code will hang. So just to understand the construct of the loop, you initialize the control variable, then you put a condition, and if the condition is true, then you go or repeat the loop body, and then you increment the control variable, and then again check the condition. If the condition is still true, the loop keeps on going, and the moment it becomes false, you exit the loop body or the loop block, and then you go to the next line of code after the loop. This is the basic construct of a loop. Now, before we get into our first loop, which is the for loop, we need to understand one important function, which is the range function. If you already know it, it's great. You can skip this part. Otherwise, let's talk about the range function. So range function gives a sequence of numbers from a specified start, stop, and step. So basically you specify the start, stop, and step parameters or values, and the range gives a sequence of numbers based on this. For example, uh, uh, if you sorry, before we go there, before we go to the example, the syntax is range, the keyword is range, and then you say specify the start, comma, stop, comma, step. So start and step are optional. So if you do not specify the start, the default value is 0. If you don't specify the step, the default is 1, right? So let's try to understand this with some example. If I say range 5, it gives me a sequence from 0 because I have not specified the start. This 5 means this is the stop. So starting from the start position default 0, and with the step of default 1, because again I have not specified a step, so default step is 1. So it goes all the way up till 4. Please note that it does not include, it excludes the value. The stop value is excluded. Just one stop, one less than the stop value. Second example is 2 comma 10. So in this case 2 is start, 10 is stop. Step is not specified, the default step is 1. So it starts from 2 with a step of 1, so which means 2 plus 1 3 plus 1 4, all the way up till 10, but excluding 10, right? Very important, excluding 10, so only up till 9. And then if I say it like this, 2 10 3, so it gives a sequence like 2 5 8. So basically 2 plus 3 5, 5 plus 3 8, and if I add 3 to 8, it becomes 11. It goes beyond 10, so that's why only 2 5 8. So these are the possible combination of range function. And why we discuss range function is because this is used to initiate most of your for statement, for loops rather. So let's talk about the for loop. For loop is used to iterate over a range of values, which is specified by the range function we just discussed, or a sequence. Sequence could be a list or a string or a dictionary or a set. These values or sequence can be either numeric or elements of a data type like a string, list, tuple, dictionary, or set like I said. With every iteration of the loop, which means loop goes 1, twice, thrice. So in every iteration means the loop runs for the first time, then second time, then third time, fourth time, so on and so forth. So every time it's running, it's the iteration. So the control variable checks if end of sequence or range of values has been reached. So it checks for the end of that sequence of range of value, right? For example, in the range function we just discussed, so it will check whether it has reached the end 5, right? And if it is a list, it will check whether it has reached the end of the list, and so on and so forth. With every iteration of the loop, so this we already discussed, once loop exits, the control goes. Control means where your program is right now, right? In which line of code the program is. So the control goes to a statement immediately after the for loop. So you have a for loop body, it will follow the next line of the for loop. And the number of iteration of the loop are known in advance in a for loop. We know how many times the loop has to run, right? This will become more evident once we run the code. Please note that in the for loop doesn't require control variable to be set beforehand. You do not need to set it beforehand, right? Okay, so let's take an example here. So this is how you write your how do you say, the range function, right? So these are all the combinations we have already discussed, and these are the outputs it will give. So I'm not going to run this, but let's talk about the for loop now. So this is an example of a for loop, right? Now in this case, again, before I go here, let's try to understand how the syntax of for loop works. So I will say the first keyword for the for loop, right? And then there are multiple ways of writing a for loop. Like in case I'm using a range, I'll say for I in range 5, something like this, and then colon, and then enter. The moment I do an enter, it gives me an indent, because this means this is the body of the for loop, right? And there could be as many line of code in the for loop as we want, right? So we can have sorry about that. So we can have as many line of code inside the for loop, and then if I reduce the indent by going back to the start or removing the indent, then we are out of for loop, right? So this is, we are in this line, line number 11, we are out of the for loop. So this is how the for loop is written. I can also write a for I, or maybe for alphabet in, let's say I write A, B, C, D, E, and then like this. So basically in this case it will run through each element or each alphabet of the string, right? So for loop can be run through like I said, a range, a string, and also you can run it through a list. Let's say this is a list, so I'm running through this list 1 2 3 4, right? So all these options are available, and also it can run through a dictionary or a set. So coming back to this example, so in this example of for loop using a range, what I've done is I'm saying sum is 0. I'm initializing a variable sum 0, and then I'm saying for I in range 6, which means 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So that's a sequence. So this for loop will run for this range, which has a sequence of 0 till 5, and it will sum the each value of I. So first I will be 0, so it will add 0 to sum, which is 0. Then I will become 1, so it will add 1 to sum becomes 1 now. Then I will be 2, and sum is 1, so add 1 to 2, so on and so forth. And ultimately, once you have reached the end of this range, which means you go to 5 and then you go to 6, the loop automatically comes out and you reach here. Right? And then I'm printing the sum here. So basically, it is coming out of the loop. How do we know that we have come out of the loop? The indent is gone. You see over here there is an indent, but over here there is no indent, right? So now next example is the for loop for a list. So I'm using a list here. This is a list of names, and I'm saying for name in name list, which means for each name in this name list, there are 3 names here. So I'm saying print name, and also I'm saying I'm inside the loop over here because there is an indent here. So this line as well as this line, both of these line 15 and 16 are part of this for loop. And then over here I have removed the indent, which means this line number 17 is outside the loop, and hence I'm printing I'm outside the loop. So if I run this loop, just see what happens. So I first so let's try to understand how this loop runs. So this is the list, and then I'm saying for name in name list. So basically it goes to the first name, then second name, and third name. So when it goes to the first name, it prints the name, which is Amit in this case, and it prints I'm inside the loop, so it says I'm inside the loop. Then because this is up till here, this is the for loop, so it doesn't go outside, it goes back again here, and still it goes to the second name, which is Vimla this time. So it is not at the end of the list, so it again runs the for loop, and then it prints the name, which is Vimla, and then it again prints I'm inside the loop. Then it does not go out to the line number 17, but goes back and to the third name Sunita. This is still not end of the list. This is the last element though, and it will print the name, which is Sunita, and it will print I'm inside the loop. Now there are no more names here, so which means it comes out of the loop in line number 17, and then it says print I'm outside the loop, and hence I'm getting here I'm outside the loop. That's how it runs, right? This is the for loop using a list. Now let's explore the while loop. It executes a block of code repeatedly as long as the control condition of the loop is true, which is executed before any statement inside the loop. So after each iteration, the control condition is tested again and the loop continues as long as the condition remains true. When condition becomes false, control goes to the statement immediately after the while loop. It is not executed even once if condition is false from start, and we need to define or initialize a control variable for a while loop to run, right? And we need to increment or decrement the control variable, or else the loop will continue forever, right? We'll understand this once we have a look at the code. So let's go to the while loop. And you see this is how a while loop is written, right? So just like the for loop, there is a keyword while and then there is a colon. The moment you press an enter after colon, you get this indent. So I already have this code, so I'm saying sum, and I'm saying I is equal to 0, and I is the control variable which is being used as a condition in while loop. So if I say while I is less than 6, so since I is 0, it is less than 6, right? Obviously. If let's say for some reason I is 10 here, so over here 10 is less than 6. So from the beginning, the condition is false. So it will not run, it will come out of this while loop, which is up till here, and it will go to line number 25 if this was the case. But coming back, let's say if we have 0, So this condition holds true. So it will say sum is equal to sum plus I. So sum is 0, I is initially 0, so it will add this, then I is incremented here. Now in case if we had not used this line number 24, there is no increment of I will always remain 0. It will this condition will always hold true, and this loop will keep on continuing perpetually for infinite number of times, and your system will hang, or the loop will go into an infinite loop, right? So that's why we need to increase this I or decrease the I depending on the condition over here, so that somewhere down the line this condition becomes false and we are able to come out of the loop. Now in this case I is incremented here, so next I becomes 1, and again it checks if I is less than 6, so it is not less than 6. Initially sum was 0, now sum becomes sum plus I, which is now 1, sum becomes 1 and I becomes 2. Again this condition is checked, so on and so forth, and ultimately I will become 7 or 6 rather, and 6 is less than 6, and it is false because 6 is equal to 6. So the moment it becomes 6, it comes out of the loop and you get the sum, whatever the sum is here, right? So this is how a while loop runs. Now we have covered both for and while loop. Let's try to understand them side by side. So for loop, in for loop we enter a for loop against each element, and we check for the occurrence of the, or if we have encountered the last element. If no, then you run through the loop body and you increment the element position, and you keep on running this loop as long as the last element is not covered. And the moment you reach that last element, you run for that last element as well, and then you come out of the loop after that, and you exit the loop body and you go to the next line of code after the for loop. So just the example we just did. So it keeps on running until you reach the last element, and then you go to the last line, or the line about the while loop. In while loop, the while loop is entered each time the condition is true. So basically, uh, unlike for, you have to have the condition specified in while statement true every time. So if the condition is checked whether it is true or false. If it is true, then you run through the loop body, just like the for loop. You change or increment the control value, right, in specified in the while statement, and this loop keeps on repeating itself as long as the condition is true. And then because we are incrementing or decrementing the element, somewhere down the line the condition will become false, and the moment it becomes false, it exits the loop and it enters the next line of the code after the while loop. So this is the while loop, like we said. So we have to initialize this control value I, and I is also being incremented. So I is being incremented, and also I am initializing it here. So which is also important for what do you say, a while statement. And then you run through this loop, and after the loop the condition becomes false. It goes to line number 7 here, which is the line after the while loop. And we know that this is the end of the while loop because the indent is gone. So basically you'll see that these are the main point of difference, that in for loop you look for the last element to exit the loop, whereas in while loop you look for the condition being set to false to exit the loop. Next are loop control statement. So loop control statements are basically some statement that you use when you don't want the loops to follow the normal flow of sequence, right? So for example, there is a break statement. It ends the loop in which it's written and goes to the statement just after the loop, right? So let's first cover them one by one, and then we'll run them in the code window also. This was break statement. Continue statement is basically it skips the execution of remaining code lines inside the loop for the current iteration. So let's say a loop is running for 5 times, and if you have written a continue somewhere based on some logic, so let's say after first iteration you encounter the continue statement, so it will skip remaining code for that first iteration and go to the second iteration. So basically it skips that iteration and continues from the beginning of the loop for the next iteration. And then there is pass statement. Pass is, as the name suggests, it passes the control or where your program is So essentially it does nothing. It's helpful in debugging because you cannot write an empty loop, right? For example, you cannot say an empty for loop, so you can write a pass instead, so that it helps you in debugging. So basically, in a loop, you can write something like break, right? So you can say break, or you can say continue, or you can say pass, right? So all these are option available, and once you get into advanced code or debugging, you can explore these. For the time being, I'm skipping these. And finally, we reach to nested loops. So as the name suggests, nested loops are nothing but loops inside a loop. So there will be an outer loop, then there would be an inner loop, and there could be as many inner loops. The inner loop will run one whole cycle. So let's say in this example, if you see, there's this loop and there's another loop. So this loop will run, uh, let's say it's running for as 5 times. It will run 5 times for every iteration of the outer loop. You can use any type of loop for nested loop. It could be a for or while, okay, and it could be a combination also. So maybe the outer one is for, inner one is while, and vice versa. And like I said, there are no restrictions on how many loops uh, you can have inside a loop, right? So you can have one loop inside another loop, and then more loops inside the inner loop, and another loop, so on and so forth. So let's take this example. So for example, if I want something like this to as an output, which wherein x1, we are doing a combination of these with each element of these. So basically x1 y1, x1 y2, x1 y3, and x2 y1, x2 y2, x2 y3, and like finally x3 y1, x3 y2, and x3 y3. So basically we can run a loop for this variable, this list rather, x13, and it runs this loop, and inside this loop I'm having another loop for y in y13, which is running through each element of this. So basically this inner loop runs for each element of the outer loop. So once x113 is x1, so it runs for y1, y2, y3 for each of x1. So that's why I get x1 and y1, y2, y3 for each value of x1. Next x2, again 3 values for x2. So x2, 3 values, and x3, again 3 values, right? That's how you run this code. If you want to see this code in the code window, so you see this is a nested loop, and we have these two lists, and this is how we run the nested for loop. So this is a nested for loop, and I'm having a for outer for loop, and then there is inner for loop, which is noted by this indent. And you see this indent has 1 and 2 indent because this is part of the inner for loop, hence there are 2 levels of indent. And if you run this code, it will run for all values of y13 for each value of x13, so x13 or y13, sorry. So like I said, all this y1, y2, y3 for x1, y1, y2, y3 for x2, y1, y2, y3 for x3. That's how this code nested loop runs. So so that brings us to the end of the loops in Python. In case you find this interesting, do like, comment, or share our video, and we will be back with more videos on Python. Thank you so much.